development finance space and infrastructure development. So for me, it's been an eye-opening in terms of the benefits, and particularly to communication, that our satellites enhancing our ability to use our phones and internet, GPS, which helps us to navigate, particularly traffic, and in the aviation industry. So public-private partnerships are becoming very common in this space, exploration space. But we need to harness and ensure that we get more private sector involved, because this is quite an interesting space, but it's very expensive. And I think putting together the visions of the private sector and government will give us innovative solutions and make the industry efficient. Without wasting time, Tisetso, I would like to conclude by thanking everyone for availing themselves and being here present for them to contribute and identify solutions to this industry. And welcome all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bongile, for those opening remarks. And indeed, we are but hoping and looking forward to hear more on what the colleagues are going to contribute in this topic of how we can harness the public-private partnerships for sustainable space exploration and utilization. And I think one of the things that we are moving towards now is actually trying to tap into the public-private partnerships. And although it comes with a lot of challenges and sometimes it's criticized, but it's good to have this kind of conversations where we try to see how we can harness it, how we can overcome some of these challenges. So thank you so much, Mema Zibuko. So I'm quickly now gonna move to our keynote address, and we're gonna have our keynote address from Mr. Raoul Hodges. Mr. Raoul Hodges is an executive director of SANSA Space Science and the former executive director of SANSA Space Operations, and has extensive experience overseeing the telemetry, tracking and command, or what is often known as TT&C, and Earth Observation Centers operations. So he has managed numerous multinational programs and agreements that involve the space operation and satellite data. So the data is primarily used in South Africa and the SADC region, which has served the Earth observation community for many years. So he has also collaborated with local and international space business to invest and collate ground assessment equipment at Harbert's Hook, I think, in the northwest, and now it is now in development. It's been developed now, and the new I think it's Fontaine ground station in the Western Cape, whereby raising the South Africa's reputation in the global space industry. So, Mr. Raoul, I'm going to hand over to you to give us the opening remarks. Mr. Raoul.
Thank you, dear. So thanks for those kind words. Yeah, I think it's to me it's a huge privilege to sit here today and give a keynote address to something that is so close to my heart as space, for which I've spent probably my whole career. But yes, to the esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests and friends of space, of the space frontier, thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And let's have a fruitful discussion regarding this during the panel session. Today I want to, discuss the public-private sector and how it incorporates into space, and what South Africa will bring to the table and how we will link to the international space, because space is common. It's a common goal worldwide for all of us, and it has huge aspirations, and these aspirations are not limitless. But these aspirations come with robust partnerships. It's expensive, it's huge projects, and the risks are extremely high. And in the light of that, we want to understand the next chapter in the space exploration. Where are we going to, and do we want to be part of it? I believe that today we're going to sit and discuss public-private partnerships in this thriving economy. And a public-private partnership is nothing more than an alliance between a government and the private sector. It's not just beneficial, but it's essential for a country to get its public and private working together on a common goal. As I said, it's a new playground, or it's a huge playground, and there's very expensive toys to play with, but the benefits are extreme for a country like South Africa at the end of the day. We sit with a huge population all over the country for which we have to give, as a public entity, a service. And I believe that the private sector can benefit from that in the end of the day. Our expansion as a nation brings exciting possibilities. I mean, from a potential of zero gravity manufacturing and opportunities for new scientific breakthroughs. Just to mention a few that South Africa is already part of, is the manufacturing of space equipment for international industry. South Africa is involved in the planning and the building of sounding rockets, and at the end of the day, launching of spacecraft, which will become in the future. South Africa is building its own spacecraft. South Africa tracks from the Southern Hemisphere most of the Earth observation satellites that we use today and brings the data back. South Africa has the biggest ground station in the whole of Africa and competes worldwide from the Southern Hemisphere. Those are typically the things that South Africa is already busy with as a public entity. Imagine if we made the public and private working together, what the advantages would be. And the public-private partnerships is uniquely positioned to address these challenges. The government can provide the oversight, regulated, I can never get that word right, framework. What does the private sector bring to the table? The private sector brings low overhead costs, it brings agility, it brings knowledge, innovation, and not least capital to the party. So if you combined what the public sector and the private sector can give you, we could probably implement and maintain a great space sector in South Africa. Probably one of the questions is why public partnerships are key. Well, it's risk sharing. So it doesn't just then lie on the public sector's shoulders to bring this exciting technology to its people, but it also relies then on the private sector to bring capital, broader pool of excellence, so that public sector doesn't tackle this massive burden by itself. It also brings innovation through diversity of thought. In a perfect world, the private companies bring fresh perspectives, technology, advances, and often a nimbleness that government bodies do not have. Government bodies typically wrap themselves up into a more regulatory base which does not have the agility to move fast and as fast as the space industry moves. The space industry is moving at a rate which the private sector is battling to keep up, because we're bringing that technology to the people and an ever-growing population. Somehow we have to set standards. Sustainability in space is heavily shared on the norms, on standards. So a unified approach to space traffic management can ensure a safer and more efficient way of doing things. Working together with the public sector, we can co-develop standards, balance safety, innovation, be more sustainable for the use of space, have a collaborative framework, and many of those things which we can gain by working together as private and public. By using public and private sector, our ultimate goal must be the space economy. The economy of space outweighs many other advantages of operations or how can I put it? It outweighs the cost and the advantages you're going to get from space, and the delivery to the people outweighs many businesses in wealth, in funds, and knowledge. The space knowledge and the technology is the forefront of your technology. What gets built into space and launched into space is tomorrow's motor vehicle spares. So it filters down, all the way down to your man in the street, which uses a cell phone or chasing WhatsApp to be able to do his business. A faster technology which is being developed on a daily basis. It's bringing space closer to those who might otherwise be left behind. So we want to, in the end of the day, as a public sector, we want to enable the people or the man in the street with the best technology so that he can in future build a nation with his kids and his families and businesses alike. There's some case studies where the private sector and the public sector really work together. I'm going to give you some examples. If we're going to have a look at NASA, NASA is probably on everybody's lips. It's got the best brand in the world, but it's not for free that they don't have the best, that they have the best brand in the world, because they've been pushing the boundaries since 1962. And South Africa also started in 1962, for those that don't know. So South Africa was part of the space race in 1962. Artemis Hoek was built in 1962. And we should have, well, we haven't, let's put it this way. We've been part of that space race all along, and that's why we've been so successful in South Africa. But it's been heavily relying on public. The private sector is growing extremely fast in South Africa. So bringing the public and the private sector together in South Africa is going to enhance that for us. The partnering of NASA and its commercial crews and getting different rocket designs and using the private sector reduced their costs enormously. So it was a cost reduction by doing private and public sector merging or business together. If you have a look at other space agencies, such as European Space Agency partnerships with private and satellite companies, have allowed Europe to improve its Earth observation technologies beyond anybody else because of that combination where public gave the funds to build the spacecraft. Public used the information to develop applications for the nation, which enhances all those technologies. To mention something else, if you have a look at the Norwegian Space Agency, which spun off KSAT, which is probably the biggest ground station collaboration in the world at the moment, with 380, I think 380 antennas across the globe. So that made a huge impact. Controlling that and bringing that income back to the Norwegians and the technology back to the Norwegian Space Agency was a huge move in that direction. We can have a look at other advances. But as we celebrate these successes, we must also remember the lessons learned from challenges we have faced in the past, as lives in the future could be at stake. So in space, we all see the launch and the glory behind it, but there's been many hours where mistakes have been made and learned from those mistakes. So let's talk about a vision for the future of a collaboration. The future of space exploration is bright, but it will require combined commitment. Here's what I believe the commitment looks like. Sustainable design and practices. From the inception of projects, we have to prioritize sustainability. We can't keep on launching spacecraft which cannot come back to Earth. We're cluttering the orbits, and that type of sustainability for the future needs to be addressed. If you have a look at some of the technology that has been used to already go that route, you can have a look at SpaceX, which launches spacecraft and brings the rocket back to be reused, where in the past that rocket or that shell would have been dumped in the sea. So they're sitting with a record, I think, of 19 times using the same motors and the same rocket. So they brought it back 19 times. Not only is it sustainable for the future, but can you imagine what the cost reduction was by using the same rocket 19 times? Okay. And that will ensure that we have resources of going back to space for many years to come, and the planning of such. Collaborative policies and frameworks. The policies that or the frameworks that we establish today will shape the future of this environment for decades to come. By creating shared policies and mandates, typically debris management, safe traffic protocols, ethical resources extraction, we can lay the groundwork for responsible space exploration that benefits all in humanity. As I said in the beginning, it is between the private sector and the public sector. The public sector writes this legislation. The private sector will enhance it and make sure that it works. Education and workforce development. The next generation will inherit the knowledge that we've put into this space technology at present. So we continue ensuring that there's a steady pipeline of diverse skills professionals who are ready to solve these complex problems. We will have the face to push further into space and leave a legacy for our children and our students. I've got some points to ponder on. So in a partnership between the private sector and the public sector, who creates the rules of engagement? What role does government oversight and contractual obligations play? So in the light of that, I want to use, everybody's read about it, the Starlink dilemma in South Africa. There's a technology which can serve the whole country, but we have a legislation challenge. Okay. Private sector is fast and agile response and risk-taking. Public sector is slow, risk-avert. What role can a long-term planning, such as a 30-year space agenda, play to foster this public-private partnership? If you have a look at international trends, the strategic planning of huge NASA, the US, European, the strategic plan is funded and planned for between 50 and 80 years ahead. Are we as South African on par with that? Are we ready to fund space for the next 50 years? Does South African public entities provide accountable structure and long-term perspectives? How can the public-private partnership ensure that South Africa plays a part in the space exploration on a global level? It is key that we get involved in a global level, and not, let me not be harsh and say tinker in our garages. We have to get involved worldwide so we, as South Africa, can prove a point. We have the skills, we have the people. We just have to get our act together. In closing, as we push the boundaries of human presence in space, let us remember that our responsibilities go beyond this generation. We've all got kids, and they are still going to take this forward. Space is a shared heritage of humankind, and we have the duty to steward this wisely. Public-private partnerships offer us a chance to harness our collective strengths, pursue ambitions and goals, and establish a culture of sustainability in space that will benefit generations to come. So let us proceed with the intention and responsibility. Together we have a potential not just to explore space, to build a future for our country in that respects, protects and uplifts our values we hold dear. Thank you. That's it from me.
Thank you so much, Raoul, for such an exciting and informative presentation, and also for providing a foundation for our discussion as we proceed with our webinar today. And I would also kindly request you to also perhaps be able to join our partnerships, not our partnership, sorry, our panel discussion, because I believe that there are some questions that may come your direction. But for me, some of the takeaways that that I picked up is how you unpacked what private partnership is, and I think that's a good starting point, to try to speak about what is private partnership, particularly in relation to the space. And speaking of some of the benefits of the private partnership, and highlighting some of the case studies that have been there, some of the lessons that have been learned from the projects that are in existence, and also laying out a vision for the future, where you highlight the need for commitment for sustainability. That if we're going to speak about sustainability, that's something that we need to really commit to. And I know this coming from a background of environmental law, and extractive industry. The issue of sustainability is something that is very great at this point in time, which as you said, it really requires commitment. It requires for us to be intentional about it, because there is a saying that we have in environmental law, that if we're going to continue, we have the Earth now, we have the resources that you're holding, but you're holding them in trust. And for the future generation, we need to ensure that the future generation is able to enjoy the resources, but also the space as well. We need to ensure that we make sure that we deal with it in such a way that the future generation can be able to do that, and also the points to ponder on. And one of the things that I love that you spoke about, which kept on going on my mind as I was listening to you speak, the issue of the power dynamics between the state or the public entities and the private entities, those dynamics. I would love to hear quite a lot about that in our discussions. How do we navigate around those power dynamics? Because I know it's one of the challenges that have been flagged out when we speak about the private partnership. So, but thank you so much, Raoul. Like I said, I would love you to stay and join us during the panel discussion, and also do a contribution. And there are questions that perhaps I will then be directing to you based on the presentation that you made. So, colleagues, at this point, we are going to perhaps, I don't know, I think I would like to take one or two questions, while our minds are still fresh, based on the presentations. One or two questions, not going to be many because we have specifically a Q&A session that, slotted into our program. But, now that, Raoul has just made his presentation, I just want to take one or two questions or comments, contributions that can be directed to him before we move to our panel discussion. And if you can just use the hand function, raise a hand function if you have any question or comments. And I think there is a question in the chat box. Oh, there's no question as yet. Colleagues, if you have questions or comments, I would love to. Thank you so much, Ilana. I see your hands up.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Antlo. I just wanted to say there is in the Q&A box questions. One from Leseja Moch and then Lawrence Majila. So there are two questions already in the Q&A box if you want to perhaps pose those questions to our keynote speaker.
Oh, thank you so much, Ilana. I will start with a question from Leseja. Raoul, Leseja says, how do we include local investors to understand commercial and the impact value provided by space?
Yeah, the state continues because the public entities continue to see the value in space and will continue driving that space project over a period of time because of the needs for its constituents or its people which it represents. The private sector typically in South Africa is growing very fast. But I think that one of the lacking things is how do we get the private sector and the public sector to communicate more regarding what we do in space. There's a bit of in my humble opinion, a bit of a communication gap between the two of us and what we can do to make it more effective so that the private sector can get more involved and see and enhance and get involved with the public sector. There are some programs which the Space Agency in South Africa does and publishes. So get involved and have a look at the website and see where the Space Agency is going toward with its strategy and its plans. And yeah, let's start this discussion. But there is a bit of a communications gap in South Africa as a whole regarding space. And space is not just for the elite. Unfortunately, it is seen as an elitist project because of the cost. So the minute somebody says to you, the cost is, you just ignore it because you can't get there. But there are many programs in space where we need your intuition or your innovation that can enable us. And we were, as a space agency and on behalf of SANSA, we're willing to listen. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much, Roland. And I think, having this kind of platform and discussion that UP has started with SANSA, I think it's a good start, to create a platform where we can start to have this kind of conversation and to see how we can ensure the partnership. But I'm just listening to you now and also your presentation. I think one of the things that you kept on highlighting on it's the issue of cost, that it can be quite expensive, particularly for private partners. And for me, and this you need not address, but it's just a question, just a typical way in me is just already thinking about issues of justice, issues of justice and equality and equity, the exclusion or inclusion of the marginalized group or disadvantaged group. Can they afford, be part of the private sector to then play a part in this role? Like, how do we accommodate, the previously marginalized groups or disadvantaged groups? Do they even have a place to play in this? But without wasting any time, I want to take, there was a second question that I saw from Lawrence. Lawrence asked a question. I sort of lost Lawrence's question now. Lawrence asked a question: how do you see the licensing framework for private launch companies in South Africa through the SACSA? Has the Space Affairs Act been updated?
Okay, so presently the Space Affairs Act is being updated. It is in its final draft, as far as I know. How do we see I think the question was, how do we see the launch space in South Africa in the future? Am I correct if that's the question?
Yeah, how do you see the licensing framework for private launch companies in South Africa through the SACSA?
Yeah, so the Department of Trade and Industry is working on the Space Affairs Act. I'm not 100% sure exactly what the private sector is when it comes to the launch capabilities in South Africa. As far as I know, the University of Natal, or the UKZN, has a huge program in building rockets, and has launched small sounding rockets from South Africa, and is in that testing process. So I believe if there is a huge need, or there's a private company, a partnership that knocks on the door with a space agency, or knocks on the door with a public sector, those are the things that can be overcome, because we're looking for the partnerships. So it can't just be a public entity that drives that bus. We're looking for those partnerships, and if there is a private entity that has great value and believes that they can drive such an organization in South Africa with the public sector, let's discuss it. Let's get around a table and see what the plan is and what the return on investment is, and see if it's going to hold for the future, and whether it's going to address all the nuances of a public-private partnership.
Thank you so much, and I believe Majila, you are answered. However, if you're not, then feel free to continue the conversation on the Q&A box. Colleagues, we will revert back to the other comments that are there. So please keep on the conversation going on the Q&A, and those who can also be able to respond to some of the questions that have been posed or comment, please feel free to have a conversation going on the chat box. So during the Q&A session, we'll then get back to addressing some of those questions that will either be addressed to Raoul, or that will be then addressed to our panelists. So right now, without wasting any more time, I quickly want to jump into the panel discussion. So in our panel discussion today, our panel discussion it's titled "Legal, Ethical, and Regulatory Challenges and Consents in Public-Private Space Partnerships through Technological Innovations and Sustainability Space." And then we have 4 panelists today that are going to be tackling this topic. So how this session is going to go. I'm first going to introduce our panelists, and then I'll pose 1 or 2 questions, or a couple of questions, not 1 or 2, a couple of questions to our panelists, and then when I pose a question, so some of the questions I'll specifically direct to a specific, panelist, but however, if you feel that, as part of a panelist, you want to comment, you want to add, or you want to pose a question to, the fellow panelists, please feel free to, do the hand emoji or function to indicate that you have a question, and then we can have a question. So you just don't necessarily have to wait until all the questions are asked, or if you have an opinion, you just keep silent just because the question was not directed to you. So in our panel discussion this morning, we do have Mr. Jody Sandelinas. Mr. Jody Sandelinas is born and currently living in Barcelona in Spain. And this goes to show how international this webinar is. So he's based in Barcelona. He works as an aerospace lawyer for space startups and space organizations. Also serves as a part-time lecturer for the Open University of Catalonia and the Distance University of Madrid, plus the University of Pompeu Fabra. I'm sorry if I'm butchering some of the words. And where he imparted the discipline of space law, drone law, and international law. So he comes with 11 years experience of practice in the space sector, 12 years of teaching experience in the field of space law, drone law, and international law, plus 15 articles that have been published and 33 conferences which imparted worldwide to allow him to explore, to create, and to propound different paradigms in relevant space law. So that is Jody, our first panelist, and then we have Judy, Ms. Judy Sadok. So Ms. Judy Sadok is the co-founder and the managing director of Max IQ Space and a trailblazer in the space STEM education, with a dynamic career spanning over 3 decades. And industries as diverse as mining, oil and gas, and the pulp and DEPA. Judy bridges the wealth of technical expertise and transformative education. So her academic achievement in chemical engineering, applied chemistry, and business leadership, it bolstered by her MBA. She also holds an MBA from the Gordon Institute of Business Science, and which then also lays a foundation for her innovative approach to knowledge and education. So she's also the author of The Art of Managing Knowledge, a practitioner's guidance. So Judy has influenced a business through her book. She influences the business leadership or leaders across South Africa, Singapore, and Japan, while her hands-on leadership has positioned the Max IQ space at the forefront of educational innovation. So under her guidance, the students worldwide have not only explored but also contributed to the space exploration, with many are designing and launching their own satellite. Wow. An inspiring statement to a commitment to equipping youth for the fourth industrial resolution. And then we also have colleagues, Mr. Rees Lenting. So Mr. Rees is a first-year doctoral candidate at the University of Pretoria within the Public Law Department, and he is being supervised by Professor Ntombizuzu Mhango, who is also our head of department, and she's in our midst this morning. Rees also, he recently completed his second master's at the specializing in international aviation law on a fully funded scholarship. While in France, he gained a valuable experience in the aeronautical sector through an internship at ATR. Some of these words, guys, they are too much of a science for me as a typical lawyer. So bear with me when I butcher some of these technical terms. But a leading regional aircraft manufacturer based in Toulouse, as well as the boutique aviation law firm in Paris. So as a junior academic, he focuses his attention on the development of public international aviation law, the third world approaches to international law theory, and at present, the single African air transport market as it relates to liberalization of the skies above the African continent. And also, again, Risa, I want to congratulate you for being appointed as a lecturer at the University of Pretoria in the Department of Public Law as a temporary lecturer, I believe. So congratulations. So he will be joining us at UP, but in the Department of Jurisprudence. And then again, we have Professor Anel Ferreira Snyman, who is a professor in the Department of Jurisprudence in the School of Law at the University of South Africa, or UNISA, as we frequently call it, and her field of research in public international law with a specific focus on international outer space law. So Professor Ferreira Snyman has published widely in the academic journals and the books, and she regularly presents papers at the national and international conferences. So, as part of the academic space, we expected to do such things. So, Anel is also co-consulting editor and a contributing author for the first and the second edition of the book Outer Space Law, Legal Policy and Practice, which is published by the Globe Law and Business in London. So she also has been a recipient of an academic award and grants, including grants from the Dutch South African Association Amsterdam, and what we usually call NRF. NRF. I haven't had my coffee, so sometimes my tongue gets twisted a bit. So, and so Anel was also awarded both the Principals and the Chancellor's prizes for excellence in research at the University of South Africa. So from 2016 to 2019, Anel was the co-editor-in-chief of the South African Yearbook of International Law. So she currently an individual member of the International Institute of the Space Law and a legal research member of Association for International Legal Research on space sustainability. Thank you so much, colleagues, for joining this morning and joining the panel. And we're just going to take it off from where Raoul left it. And if you have any comments on what he presented on, you are more than welcome just to also share your comments on what he on his presentation. So I think as a starting point, I would love to pose a question, well, to all of you, the panelists. But I would want to start with you, Anel. So because sometimes when you do this kind of presentations, we sort of assume that everybody understands the terminology that we are using, but I would want us to sort of start first by unpacking, the terminology, to sort of make it understandable to everyone. So my first question would be, and I'm going to direct it to Anel, but other panelists as well, start to think about it, because I'm going to pose the same questions to you as well. So what does sustainable space exploration mean, in the context of public-private partnerships? I mean, we have heard of, when you read literature, you hear about public-private partnership, in the spaces where we have to do service delivery. The municipalities, for instance, or government departments will partner with private entities to help foster service delivery or to improve service delivery. However, I'm keen to sort of understand from your understanding, what does sustainable space exploration mean in the context of the PPPs?
I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Yes, I thank you very much for that question. And I think that's a good way to start, since we are all talking about these partnerships within the context of the sustainable use of outer space. Now, I think it should be pointed out right from the onset that sustainability is a bit of a complex and multifaceted concept. And although it has been formulated and defined, if you wish, in international documents, its precise context remains a bit ambiguous. And in international law, we work with, or the most commonly referred to definition that we work with is the one in the Brundtland Report of 1987, which says that sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present, without compromising the ability of future generations to also meet their needs. So it is clear that sustainability has both a present and a future dimension. And commonly, sustainability also spans over three common areas, which is ecological sustainability, economical sustainability, and social sustainability. Now, it is also interesting to note that specifically in the context of outer space, there isn't a definition of sustainability at present. And in fact, the concept has only very recently, only in 2010, been recognized as an agenda item of the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee of the UN COPUOS, or the United Nations Committee for Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. And then in 2019, when the guidelines for the long-term sustainability of outer space activities were adopted, these voluntary guidelines also then provided us with, and I need to stress that it's only voluntary guidelines, it's not a treaty, it's what we are commonly referred to as soft law, it's not hard law, but it provides a definition of sustainability, and it's the ability to maintain the conduct of space activities indefinitely into the future in a manner that realizes the objectives of equitable access to the benefits of the present generations while preserving the outer space environment again for future generations. So you again have that present and future component. Now, it's also interesting to note that currently the focus of the sustainable use of outer space is mainly limited to the low Earth orbit. However, it is also becoming more important for going beyond low Earth orbit, especially in view of plans. And here public-private partnerships also come in, or for example, Moon and Mars exploration and even settlements in what we hope not to be the too distant future. So the Outer Space Treaty, as I've said, in itself does not make or provide an explicit definition of sustainable use of outer space, but it can be inferred from some of the articles. For example, Article 1, which talks about the use of outer space again on an equitable basis, the free use of outer space, and that equity is part of the sustainable use of outer space. And then Article 9 of the Outer Space Treaty, which is the most environmentally relevant article in the Outer Space Treaty, that says that there cannot, in the use of outer space, there should not be any adverse changes in the environment or any harmful contamination. The problem again is terminology. What does harmful contamination entail? But I think one can make a good case that the issue of, for example, space debris would be included. Yeah. So I think from what I've said, it is clear that there is what you people that some of our audience who know environmental law well know the term anthropocentric approach to the environment, and one can argue that the Outer Space Treaty has this anthropocentric approach to space exploration, but at this point, the achievement of the space mission's objectives is primary over the environmental impact. So since there's such an increase in private and space-sponsored ventures, which has serious implications for the protection and sustainability of the environment, environmental protection and economic development should be balanced in a way that space is not only sustainable for present generations, but also for the future. Now, this also applies to public-private partnerships. And I think also that the private sector can play a very important role in here. And to name only one example, for example, is the European Space Agency's service contract under its Clear Space program that is worth 86.2 million euros with a company that will develop a robot-like spacecraft with arms that would remove space debris from space. And this is already planned, the first mission for 2025. So although on the one hand, in our public-private partnerships, you know, the sustainable use of outer space should be set, you know, the bar should be set high, and it should be kept in mind in planning the space mission. I want to say in the same voice that the private sector can also play a very important part in helping states to sustainably use outer space and to remedy and mitigate some of the issues that we already have, like space debris. Thank you.
Dr. Rampe, mic yourself.
You're muted.
Oh, sorry. Thank you so much, Anel. Thank you for your insightful, engagement on that aspect. And I love how you start to unpack the issue of sustainability and defining sustainability, and on already highlighting some of the gaps that we are having in our legal framework, where there's no clear definition of what is sustainability in the context of space law. But even though we have guidelines now, which is, I think, it's a step in the right direction. Mr. Jody, I want to quickly jump to you as well, to sort of get your views to hear what are your views on what does sustainable exploration mean, in the context of a public-private partnership.
Okay. Thank you very much, and congratulations on the event. Well, public-private partnerships is I understand as how hybrid structures, or how different corporations and efforts from public and the private sector might come together. So, and this effort, I think it's clear because now we're living in these times as times where new actors are coming out, right? New private actors are coming out. So it's a field that is no longer like dominated by the public sector, and there are some, of course, private companies that now they seem to take the lead of the space sector. I mean, you name it, Blue Origin, SpaceX, and with the new concepts and endeavors and technological advances that SpaceX, for instance, has brought to the space market, such as the notion of reusability. Right, the reusability has lowered the cost of the missions, and not only that, it gives the possibility to embark for other small companies in the venture of space, because we should not forget that, for instance, the Falcon rocket welcomes other missions from other countries. So you can jump in to a project like that if costs are lower. Right. So one thing is the idea. I mean, money-wise, lifting a kilo to space was somewhat around like $3 million. But now, if we lower the cost could be, of course, could be cheaper to lift a kilo of matter. And of course, what will entail in the future from an economical perspective, that if we establish lunar bases, we have the Artemis Accords happening and boosting economy. So if it happens during the decade of the 2030s, if we establish bases on the moon capable of launching missions to other regions of space or to orbiting layers of the moon, then it will be even cheaper, because it will speak about $10,000, a couple of thousands dollars for a kilo, right? So about sustainability, of course, it's important, as was referred that by Professor Ferreira, the principle of forward and backward contamination. So forward and backward contamination is crucial, because we should not send matter to outer space that might alter I would say, the environmental, if we can quote it, conditions, for instance, of the moon or Mars, because we could alter the chemical structure. That's why the COSPAR organization exists, right? To establish protocols. About backward contamination, we have space debris. So, of course, we need to pay attention that the missions in charge of the space activities do not harm the space environment, which is a notion that has been discussed lately, should not harm the space environment and pose risk to other missions. And of course, about space debris. Space debris, we need to know that there are different sizes. There are almost 500,000 fragments of space debris that are hard to identify, because they are somewhat around 1 centimeter size. Typically, fragments up to 5 meters, I would say, do not survive, when they enter the Earth atmosphere, but some others they do. So that's why when notions of control and control reentries come out, because of course when a satellite is not operative anymore, then we need to redirect or deorbit the satellite to a layer which is safe, or to places in the ocean where international waters or waters beyond national jurisdiction happen to exist, right? So about public-private partnerships, let's create strong policy protocols. We've seen that, of course, it takes time to enact a legal document with a binding structure. We must pay attention, for instance, to the 1967 Outer Space Treaty. We're still discussing the definition and delimitation of outer space. So now the international community and the legislator must act fast, way faster. So that's why there's a tendency to work on protocols. work on standards. Let's create standards for space debris, standards to create open data, new licensing policies. So public and private partnerships must be willing to adopt such standards. They become customary law. And even though they belong to the soft law and indeed a non-binding framework, as a customary law, it can happen to be binding. That's why, for instance, the Charter of Human Rights is a resolution in nature. And it happens to be a customary law. So in my opinion, South Africa, it's a country that must, and should, in my opinion, respectfully, use the skills of the country. I mean, you have so many sectors that you could improve, and you could improve the space sector as well. For instance, you have a strong mining sector, so that's why, for instance, Luxembourg is in Europe is skilled in asteroid mining. So why not using the know-how? Let's use the intangibles. So knowledge is an intangible and it has value. So let's translate the needs and the skills, for instance, of South Africa to space. For instance, we can use satellite technologies. We can to locate, for instance, the areas where certain sicknesses are more common. Right, we can improve satellite technology to use for those sectors and to improve the health of the people. So let's use it for the benefit of the citizens of South Africa. And also, you have a strong market regarding tourism, manufacturing, and agriculture. So we can use drone technology, because we should not forget that the drone technology is the little brother of the satellite technology. We can take drones and capture imagery and data using remote sensors that are and provide more information than even a satellite, because we need to wait a satellite orbits the Earth again. So with a drone, we can map continuously an area. So I think that the key point is that South Africa shall be open to outsource and to establish networks, relations with the international small companies, and create a robust startup sector and an incubation sector in South Africa. The thing is that in Europe now, I mean, I think it's your time, because in Europe, the ecosystem is saturated. So there are incubation centers all over Europe. There are so many ventures and efforts coming from students, university students, that they have a ton of ideas, and the market is getting saturated. So now it's time for South Africa to, and all the countries that it seems that are waiting. So to make a first step in the industry, and a second step, and a third step, and you are capable to provide your skills and translate them into space and your needs, and try to fulfill those needs with space technology. And we are international people that we are willing to work with other countries, and we are here to help. And of course, costs are important, but we need to bear in mind that technology is getting stronger, more powerful, but cheaper. So we now refer to ultra low cost materials that form ultra low cost satellite missions. So of course, PICO satellites, they're technologies that you can launch nano satellites to space using such a technology that is capable to obtain information. So now we don't have to spend millions in a satellite, maybe thousands of euros. So that's why, reaching to partnerships with other satellite companies in Europe can boost the sector. So I think now it's a good chance for countries like South Africa to establish a strong space sector capable to help your citizens, your companies, your governments, and of course it's a matter of working with your intangibles, which is knowledge, which is, I think, very important. And respectfully, you have a lot to say in the international market. So that's the way I see it. you can incorporate new protocols in circular economy that will foster and enforce the notion of sustainability. Circular economy, we can still add value to an object that it has been launched into space. We don't need to recycle anymore. Let's try to reuse it and keep the value and not to throw it away, because there are lots of materials that are thrown away. Imagine an area called Point Nemo in the South Atlantic. We have like 2 international stations, one Russian, one Chinese, so many satellites launched there, and there are some environmental like issues happening there. And also South Africa, it's like surrounded by sea, and you have a lot to say regarding ocean monitoring, and you have a rich I mean, one of the richest like areas regarding marine life. So if you protect your own interest, I mean there are a lot of possibilities. So I'm sorry if I extended too much, but I think that's the way I see how we can cooperate, how can public and private partnerships can reach to such ideas. And I think now is the time to work with startups and to collaborate with international sector. Thank you for giving me the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jody. Very quickly, because I want us just to have a quick break. Reese, I don't know if you have anything to add, but just very briefly. And then I'm going to quickly jump to you, Judy, because I see you have been, nodding and agreeing quite a lot. So I believe that you have some 2 cents opinion to add there. Reese, I'm going to come to you very briefly, please, and then I'm gonna come to you, Judy.
Thank you, Doctor. And thank you for everybody else's contributions as well. For me, I always approach it from 12 theory, and we first need to understand the term of sustainability and whose perspective are we looking at it from. I think when you look at space law in general and the history of space law making, there was a lot of inclusion and exclusion that Doctor alluded to earlier, in that who was in the room and who was outside of the room. And also, Achume tells us the very nature of what is inside and what is outside is also very important. And even in the keynote speech, we heard that space is regarded as this very elite thing that is very exclusive, which it is by nature. If you go back to the history, we just had a recent article come out now by the 12 theory scholar who said that if you look at the history of it, a lot of the global south was excluded from the writings of what space law is. And if we start from that point and go forward to where we are now, that exclusion still persists. So even when we look at the definition of sustainability in terms of space, we need to understand that from whose perspective are we understanding that understanding of what sustainability is. So I think that's also very key to keep in mind, because I saw there was a question in the question box about if space law was drafted in 2025, what would we be focusing on and what would the challenges be? And I think in short, it would be then remedying that exclusion that we saw initially in the 1960s when space law was drafted.
Thank you so much, Reese. And I think you're also touching on the point that I noted from Jody, that the global south, it's our time to shine now. It's our time, to take up our space and make a significant contribution. But how then do we do that? It's also another question. How do we ensure inclusion? So that's another interesting conversation that we need to have. Judy, in the next few minutes. Not few minutes, in a minute or two, can you please just share your views on this aspect of sustainability in space exploration and in the context of PPPs?
Absolutely, Doctor. Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay? Great. The question how is actually my favorite question, because that's really what I am, is I'm an implementer. As an engineer, I'm not very strategic, etc., etc. It's more about where does the rubber hit the road. So what I've been doing is I have been making some notes. And so what I would like to do is also add on to what Geordie was mentioning, in terms of, if we take one example, which is the mining industry, we've got an incredibly strong background in mining. And what we can do is we can take what we've learned from the mining industry over hundreds of years and apply that to a very developing industry. So if we consider, let's say 100 years ago, 200 years ago, one found a resource, one just started mining, and it didn't matter how much mess you made because there was nobody around to monitor it. And it was very much kind of like, frontier town mentality of I dig out what I can and I sell it, etc. And I don't care about the mess. Then we went into an era where it was, if you want to mine, then you need to have a look at how you're going to rehabilitate the place after you've left. Okay, so that was more about kind of like, it doesn't matter how much mess you make as long as you tidy it up afterwards. Currently, the way we operate is, if you're not operating sustainably and if you're not taking 100% care of your environment, we take your license away. So what we need to do is, in terms of the space industry, we are in a situation right now where we have these satellites. They've been in orbit for decades. They're starting, their orbits are starting to decay. They're starting to come down. Now we need vehicles to go up there and capture them and deliberately bring them down. What we need to do, and that is really happening a lot nowadays, in terms of the new laws, is you cannot launch that satellite unless you've actually got a solution for how are you going to deorbit it within a certain period of time. How are you going to be able to communicate with that vehicle, make sure it's got its own propulsion so it can get out of the way of other debris, or that it doesn't become debris itself. So what we can do is we can make sure that if we operate sustainably, that in the end it actually is more cost effective. The whole thing about the Falcon rocket, for example, the reason why it's the cheapest launch vehicle is because it is reusable. So as we have fully reusable vehicles, the cost is going to come down further. And this is the right opportunity for everybody on the African continent. Is what we can do is we can now leapfrog. We don't have to make those massive investments that the Russians made, that the Americans made over 70 years, these huge infrastructure projects, building space shuttles and all of that kind of thing. We can leapfrog. We can send robots to the moon. We don't have to send people to the moon. It's also safer, let's be honest. The thing is that, we're in the situation now where we've mechanized mining. We no longer, send so many people into a mine. So what we do is we take what we've learned from the mining industry for the moon, asteroids, etc. We have to face the reality. What's going to happen is we've got two space sectors. We've got the primary space sector, which is actually the people who are in the space sector, building satellites, launching satellites, operating them, ground stations, all of that kind of thing. And then we have the secondary sector. And that is the sector where they're going to actually utilize the value of those assets. So that is tourism, it's mining, it's agriculture, environmental protection, urban planning, etc., where they're going to utilize the value produced by those assets. And that industry we really also need to be acutely aware of, because the tourism industry is going to take people to the moon, and tourism can make a mess. Mining can make a mess, all of those sorts of things. So we also need to have a look at how can we make sure that we incentivize that secondary industry to behave responsibly. So it's all about balancing people, profit, and planet. Well, actually, in this case, planetary. So yeah, it's all around creating that opportunity. We can't have a situation where all we're doing is bashing industry and saying, no, you can't, no, you can't, no, you can't. So we have to find a way where we can say, you can, because they will. That's me.
Thank you so much, Judy. Coming from the extractive industry space and environmental law space, and I fully get to what you're saying, because now sorry, in the mining sector, we are stuck with a huge problem of having to do rehabilitation and closure, and it's a problem. It's one problem which leads to another problem. But anyway, thank you so much, colleagues. Can I kindly ask that we take a quick break for the next, I think it's 7 minutes. I'm not so much of a good in maths because I'm a typical lawyer. So I think we have 7 minutes from now up until 11:30. So can we quickly grab our coffees and then be back at 11? You don't have to log out. You can just mute yourself or switch off your camera, and then we're going to resume exactly at 11:30. And thank you so much for being with us. So we can keep the conversation going on our Q&A section. So thank you so much. Let's meet at 11:30. Colleagues, welcome back from that short question. So I am hoping our panelists are also around. So we're going to proceed with our panel discussion. So I want to pose the next question. I know, I don't know, Anel, are you with us? Are you?
Yes, here I am. I'm here.
Okay. So Anel, just a quick question that I want to, direct to you. And I would also then want to pose the same questions to Jody from the private sector. So I want to just, get a view from both academic and from the private sector. So how do you envision, the partnership between SANSA, academic institution, and private enterprise to drive innovation? Because we had a lot of innovation right from Raoul, when he was speaking, he spoke a lot about innovation. So how can the partnership between SANSA, the academic institution, and the private sector drive innovation, share and mitigate the risks, some of the risks that were highlighted, and to be able to enhance this sustainable use of space resources? And what are the strategies or platforms for promoting a dialogue between the stakeholders? And I think also somebody spoke about it's high time that we start having these discussions, but how can we, or what strategies can we use to make sure that we're starting to have those discussions? And now I'll pose the question to you.
Thank you. Yes, I think what has also been said by some of the previous speakers or have been alluded to is that South Africa has quite a progressive national space industry model, in the sense that we do have public-private collaborations, and we do have specifically collaborations between academic institutions, government, and the private sector. And that is a way, as we've said, to keep the space industry sustainable and to assist the country, I think, very importantly, to achieve its developmental goals. Because at present, the use of outer space in Africa, including South Africa, is primarily for developmental purposes and for the socio-economic benefits. And that is also, as been alluded to earlier, to be involved in space exploration is no longer a luxury, but it's becoming something essential, and also for states in Africa. Collaborations between SANSA, academic institutions, and the private and private enterprises, therefore, also part of the objectives of the National Space Policy, which wants to build or promote capacity building initiatives in technology science and science and technology in general, and also to foster a robust science and technology base, specifically in research institutions and the higher education sector. Now, that is not something totally new. Already in 1999, South Africa has launched a satellite that was built with the help of the University of Stellenbosch. And then in 2013, the Cape Peninsula University of Technology launched its first nanosatellite with the assistance of Russia. And then since then, in 2018 and 2022, South Africa has launched nanosatellites that was also developed by the Cape Peninsula University of Technology. And that the last one was actually regarded as a major milestone on the continent, specifically in the area of marine awareness. So I think then going to that's as far as academic institutions are concerned. Going to the private sector, we have a very small private sector, but they're very robust. And I think one of the examples of Dragonfly Aerospace that some of the audience might have heard of. Another example, they manufactured an imaging satellite, Dragonfly, and it was launched from Cape Canaveral in the USA on a Falcon 9 rocket. And it will be involved in in monitoring harvests in the agricultural sector. So my point is that this is not something completely new. We are already involved, but this is surely, as some of the other speakers also have said, something to be developed. About the sharing and mitigation of risks, very quickly, that might not be so easily done as just say share, mitigate and mitigate risks, because of Article 6 of the Outer Space Treaty, which specifically says that states parties to the treaty shall bear the international responsibility for all national activities in outer space. And those national activities include those by private entities. So the state remains the primary responsibility holder for these activities. And therefore, that same article requires that the state must authorize and continuously supervise the activities of this private entity. Now, authorization, and that is something that Judy has alluded to just now, is usually in the form of licenses or permits. Now, currently that is left, up to states how they want to license these activities. But we do have a draft model law on national space legislation. It is in its baby steps still. It's still open for discussion. And interestingly enough, in that model law, it is suggested that things like the activity should not cause environmental damage, that it must mitigate potential space debris, and very importantly, that the private company should have insurance or some of the issues that might be included in such a license. So it will depend. The state does mitigate some of the risk through this license regime, but it cannot, totally place all the risk and responsibility on the private entity. And that is also then supported by the Liability Convention, which has a dual liability regime. And it says that where damage is caused on the Earth or to an aircraft in flight by a space object, the state shall incur absolute liability, which is not even based on fault. And where the damage is then caused in outer space, well, then fault must be proven on the part of the state or the private entity, but still it will be ultimately the state who will be responsible for the damage. So it does not make provision for direct liability to be, or get some compensation from the private activity. So the only way that states can minimize or mitigate the risk is through the national space legislation. And unfortunately, I must add as a footnote that there are still many states in Africa that do not have national space legislation. That's a conversation for another time, but that is a concern. Then that they then in this national space legislation establish measures so that they can at least recover a portion of the compensation that they had to pay on behalf of these private entities where damage was caused. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anel, and unpicking the framework legislation again, the international framework legislation, highlighting some of the issues. And one thing that captivates my attention is the issue of sharing the risks and liability, and particularly where you have private sector involved, and they're the ones who leads to whatever damage that may happen, and the state having to incur the liability or having to bear the risk. It's got a bit of a concern, and I wonder how we can navigate through that to ensure that even the private sector, if it has capacity anyway, to also show the liability. Judy, from the private sector, I want to hear your sentiments on this. And colleagues, before Judy gives us her views, I just wanted to highlight that if you have any comments or questions that you want to pose to another panelist based on their response, or you have views, can you please just kindly use the raise a hand function just to alert me that you wanna contribute to what the other speaker has just said. So, Judy, what are your sentiments?
Great, yes, thank you. So I have really 2 points that I'd like to make. The first is in terms of SANSA's engagement with local private industry. There's a very healthy, open communication with SANSA. Certainly, we've seen that in the last few years. SANSA arranges an annual conference in August, late August every year, where we all get together at the CSR in Gauteng, and there's very open communication. That's my personal feeling, is that the communication is very open. It's a lot more open than it used to be. So we're certainly going in the right direction. I think if we want to have a look at how do we more sort of formalize the public-private partnerships, we can look at 2 areas. The one area we can look at is very well-established industries. So what we could do is we could look at, for example, agriculture. How does the agricultural sector, the private agricultural sector, engage with government? There's a body, there's an industry body that engages with government. If we have a look at the mining sector, we've got the Minerals Council, which engages with government, it engages the CSIR, it handles all of those matters that are common to industry and formally engages with government. So what we could do is we could have a look at those well-established sectors and see how do they engage with government, and then actually recreate that for the space industry as a developing industry locally in South Africa. The other area we could look at is what about well-established industries? So, for example, let's have a look at how does the European Space Agency, ESA, how do they do it? Let's have a look at NASA. How do they engage with the private sector? So we've got these 2 examples. We can have a look at established industries in our own country and how they engage, and we can also have a look at established space industries and how do they engage with their governments. So that's 2 areas that we could really look at, and I'm very, very optimistic in terms of SANSA and the engagement with local industry. The second point I'd like to make actually comes back to Raoul's keynote, where he mentioned that we've got a great geographical position and we've got great ground infrastructure, and we are building even more ground infrastructure at Maatjiesfontein. And what that means is because of our unique geographical position, we can engage with everybody in the world. We don't have to pick sides. And if somebody wants to have their ground station at Maatjiesfontein, they can't say, oh, well, if those people are here or if that country's here, then we're not going to be there. Or if we are there, then that country can't be there, etc. That's too bad. It's like, if you want to sell your product in a major supermarket chain, well, then you just, it doesn't matter. Your competitors are going to be on the shelf next to you. Tough. If you want to be in the market, that's it. So what we could do, and I mean, this is a radical idea, and Prof may not like this idea. However, I'm going to put it on the table. There's a lot of satellites and a lot of satellite operators who rely on our ground segment for their data downlink. What we could do is we could say, unless you have a sustainable plan in place for that satellite, we cannot download your data. That's all I'm saying is, let's use our position geographically on our planet to make sure that other people behave responsibly. So we don't have to only worry about our own companies who are launching their own satellites and licensing with us. What we can do is we can also leverage the fact that we're providing a downlink. And maybe what we should do is we should only provide that downlink for people who behave responsibly. That's me.
Thank you so much, Julie. Reese, I wanna come to you. I if you maybe have an answer to this, I hope so. So what are the potential regulatory reforms? I mean we've sort of looked into Anel highlighted some of the the regulatory framework that we have, but from the international perspective, and also highlighting the gaps that are there. So the question that I want to pose to you is what potential regulatory reforms could support more sustainable practices in regard to the space activity. Perhaps if you also take it from the South African context, but also drawing from your experience, the having been abroad, what are some of the reforms that we can make? And then the second part of the question is, do you foresee any obstacle or difficulties with the execution of the suggested reforms? Do you anticipate any challenges?
No, thank you, Dr. Ranslo. And my answer actually will feed off of what Judy had to say. I agree with her in terms of the fact that South Africa does need to leverage its sovereignty in terms of its positioning within the global population of space actors, because it is important that we maintain that sovereignty, because even at the initial draftings of space, we heard that it has a political nature, it has an economic nature. All of these things contribute to how we behave within space. And if we can use our position as South Africa to enforce a more sustainable approach in outer space, then we should be doing that, because if how we are behaving on Earth is anything to go by, we're not abiding by that. And even in the aviation sector, just to bring it back to where I'm from, we have our 2050 goal in terms of being net zero. And it's proving to be an extreme challenge because we're already so far deep in the hole. So I think also in terms of the fact that space is somewhat of a blank canvas still, yes, we have low orbit satellites, we have other satellites, but in terms of celestial bodies, we still have this opportunity to ensure that before we start, we really start off on the right foot. So in terms of reforms, it's really important that the fact that other African states do not even have space legislation is already the problem in itself, because we need to understand as South Africa, as Africans, as people from the global South, that we do have a stake in space. We do have a voice in terms of the future of how we legislate and how we act within space. And then the obstacles, of course, space is an expensive exercise, and even if you look at capital, private has its interests in terms of its people, the population, but capital and private also have their interests. And sometimes we're not equally yoked in terms of where our interests are going. And I think that's the biggest obstacle in terms of finding that balance between the interests of governments and the interests of the private sector, because more often than not, the private sector gets involved in business for profit. If they do not see profit, then it's less likely that they'll get involved. But I also want to say that there are extreme positives that we see in the aviation sector. In Secunda, I think it's, or Sokuza, which is the mini airport that services the Kruger National Park. It's a private-public partnership between Sansa Park and Airlink, which is a prime example of when private and public do come together, we can really find a way to develop it sustainably, profitably as well.
I thank you so much. Thank you so much, Reese. And highlighting this point of the other countries not having the legal framework that that remains a concern. And that was going to lead me to a question, but I'm just going to pose it. But because of time, I would not expect us to have an answer. But I think it's something that, you know, as we go away from this webinar, that it's worth thinking about, and perhaps, you know, in our next discussions we can have it. You know, as Judy said, you know, there are other, you know, conferences where, you know, SANSA creates a platform for discussion. So perhaps it's one of the things that we can consider to have discussion. So I actually wanted to ask, what are the linkages already present between South Africa, South African industry, or South African private sector and the private sector in other countries, if ever there is any, you know, linkages, particularly in the global South, if there is that, because I think the comment that keeps coming up is that, you know, the other African countries, they don't have regulatory framework. But, you know, I just wanted to find out if, you know, what are the current linkages, if any, between the private sector in South Africa and the private sector in other countries, and where is the growth potential, if ever any, and how could the international relations of South Africa help or hinder? But like I said, that's a question that I would wanna pose for the other question. And I think the other question that I would have loved to pose, though, because we are running out of time, I would have loved to pose a question to Raoul, and, you know, ask him what are the regulatory and financial, perhaps when we are having the Q&A, he can you know, provide an answer to this. You know, what are the regulatory and financial constraints which SANSA identifies as challenges of growth of sustainable and innovative industry? Because I would have loved to get the perspective of SANSA. What are some of the challenges that they're having? But colleagues, I thought we have ample time, but I realize we are running out of time. So, because I don't want to eat up the time for us to engage with other colleagues online, I'm just going to quickly ask you to each, in 2 minutes, please, 2 minutes, to just give us your concluding remarks on our discussion, and any other points that you think they're important. Any you know, questions that we need to start to think about, you know, what is our take home? And I'm just going to give you 2 minutes each. And Reese, I'm going to start with you. In 2 minutes, just give us your closing remarks before we jump to Q&A.
Can you still hear me?
Reese, I suppose Reese is experiencing load shedding. Oh, is it on my end? Because everybody seems frozen.
Dr. Ranto, you can go ahead. We can hear you.
Oh, okay, because everybody seems frozen, so I thought it's. Oh, and South Africa, Jody, by the way, we're having a concept that we call load shedding. So, you know, don't be shocked when we just get cut off at random. It's, yeah. So okay. I think Reese is having a bit of a problem. Could be load shedding. Anel, I'm going to jump to you. What are your concluding remarks in 2 minutes?
Yes, very briefly. I think that it is clear that there are still some regulatory concerns with public-private partnerships in particular, but also in general for the sustainable, in order to ensure the sustainable use of outer space. I think it could be expected that time is, or let me start by saying time isn't on our side. And it could be expected that it would be difficult for states to, in a very short period of time, reach conclusions on these issues by concluding new treaties or hard law. So my first thing or prediction is that we will have to go the soft law route. But as Jordi has pointed out also in the beginning, that's not a bad thing, because these voluntary guidelines are concluded much easier, much faster, but they can become customary international law, which is then binding on all states. And then the second thing that I would want to say is that it is very important that we follow a bottoms-up and not a top-down approach, where all interested stakeholders are involved in this process. And that means all states, because of the common heritage of mankind principle, and also all other stakeholders like private entities, like NGOs, that all come together, and all these stakeholders are involved in this fora when these guidelines are developed. Yeah, but exciting times, and also for South Africa, I think. Thank you.
Doctor, you're still muted.
Sorry, Dr. Rantlo, you're still muted.
Oh my goodness, I'm aging. Sorry, colleagues. Judy, in 2 minutes, can you please just give your concluding remarks?
Great, thanks. Yeah, I think that in terms of keeping the dialogue open, the CEO of SANSA is really great at developing and fostering relationships. So our country is very active in the African Space Agency, and also there's a space council, I would say, within BRICS, all the nations of BRICS. So South Africa is very active there as well. What I would really recommend is contact Vaneshri's, online, and she's highly effective at communicating within and without SANSA. So maybe connect with her on LinkedIn, and let's keep the dialogue open.
Thank you so much, Judy and Jody. Now I'm going to come to you in 2 minutes. Can you please give us your closing remarks, and then I'll conclude with Reese.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, as a summary, I would insist on the fact that international cooperation is crucial. Learn from our mistakes that we've done during all this process. There's no need to create, as Judy referred, to create huge infrastructures. Here, our lessons learned consist of dividing the space economy into Earth to space, space to Earth, downstream and upstream sector. And then, of course, you have the capability to create a huge incubation center that can turn into a hub for international efforts that are willing to cooperate with South African, of course, institutions and companies. So count on us. We're open, and hopefully we can see each other more times. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy, and I hear you are sharing the sentiments of Judy that she sent a bit earlier, of learning from our past, especially from the extractive industry, that we do not want to find ourselves in the same situation that extractive industry finds itself, especially when it comes to the space sector. Reese, I'm gonna then throw the ball to your court to give us your closing remarks.
Thank you. Hopefully the network goes up this time. I share the sentiment with the other panelists in terms of the fact that we really are in an exciting time, and we mustn't lose sight of that excitement, and especially the excitement around the youth being involved in space. I think the fact that UP has an international air and space law and telecommunications masters in of itself is a great starting place for, because of course in the private-public partnership, there is a third leg that most people forget about, and that's the institutions that feed that knowledge in terms of providing that knowledge, that know-how for innovation. And I think I agree with everyone in terms of the fact that we just need to collaborate more. I saw in the chat box earlier, somebody says we're constantly working in silos on the continent. We need to come together. While the university has a master's program, even me, in my year, there was a gentleman 2 years ahead of me that did a dissertation on sustainably removing space debris. There's an entire dissertation there. Like, where's the opportunity for him to go to SANSA, for him to go to private sector? So it's really just building those bridges from the institution, private sector, and the public sector.
And thank you so much, Reese. And already speaking on behalf of the current students, job opportunities. Thank you for doing the good work there, advocating for students. So colleagues, thank you so much for the engaging panel discussion. So now we're gonna jump to our next section of this discussion, which is our Q&A. So I'm gonna be taking questions from the Q&A box. I'm going to try to take few questions, and then I will give our panelists to answer the questions. And Mr. Raoul, if you can also join the panel so that perhaps you can take some of the questions. But before I do that, thank you, Raul. Before I do that, I just want to find out if perhaps we have questions for one another as the panelists before I open the floor for or reading the questions that we have in the chat box. Do we have any questions we want to throw at one another? Raise you're the doctoral candidate. I'm gonna be. This is your chance. You're sitting with these important people, so take advantage, my brother. Take advantage.
Very well. No, thank you, Doctor, for the space. I thought I'll just give other people an opportunity as well, given the limited amount of time. But I think from me, I think the pressing issue is also our geopolitical climate, the position that South Africa finds itself in. I think it also speaks on what Judy said in terms of us as South Africa saying. So maybe this is a question for Judy then. Positioning ourselves, but having that power to say that we are going to enforce this, because we know the developments happening around the world, that South Africa is not in the strongest position at the moment. How do we then reconfigure ourselves in terms of our stance geopolitically, but also specifically within the space sector?
Reese, it's always been a challenge for us, is that, especially on the African continent, we tend to feel second class to the first world. And if we are feeling that we're not in a great position at the moment, that's actually in our heads. We command the position that we take. And we are in a really great position geographically. We have a very highly developed technical capability in South Africa. If we take some industries where we've really led the world, if we take, for example, our banking sector and the technology we have in our banking sector has led the world on a number of occasions. Our accounting practices, our corporate governance, all of that kind of thing, we actually export to the rest of the world. So I don't think we need to feel that we need to sit in second class. We can take the driving seat, we can take the front seat. And we have a country where it's very possible for all of us to work together. We have great relationships with all of our neighbors on the continent. So we're on a continent where there's a lot of collaboration and a lot of cooperation. So I'm not seeing any barriers to that at all. I think what we need to do is we just get on with it, and we not worry about people criticizing us. They don't worry when others criticize them. Okay, so let's not worry about it. Let's just take we command the position we decide to take.
Thank you so much, Judy. So I am going to take a couple of questions from our audience on the chat box, and then I will then sort of change and then take questions from our live audience, and I would really appreciate it if our participant can then just use a function, the raise a hand function, to indicate that they have questions. So the first question that I have that I wanna pose, I'm not sure who it is directed to, but Felix, you are more than welcome to just unmute and answer the questions. The panelists, that is. So I have a question from Leseja. So Leseja wants to know how do we include local investors to understand commercial and impact value that is provided by space. And I don't know if Judy, you can take that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do have is we have it's a fairly nascent organization, ZA Space Inc. It was developed during during 2019 as part of the Space Infrastructure Hub. So in 2019, the President's Office dedicated a significant budget to building space infrastructure. And SANSA is well down the path of actually developing a lot of those infrastructure projects. And that's a whole presentation on its own. That's a whole nother hour of what is actually happening in the country in terms of developing that space infrastructure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one recent example is that Westgrow, the economic development agency within the Western Cape, what they do is that they facilitate discussions between the private space sector, local investors, venture capital funds, etc., SANSA, Denel, all of that kind of thing. So they definitely facilitate those conversations. And then also I saw that there was a post in the chat as well about how one can actually get a DTIC funding for developing businesses, etc. So connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to find out a little bit about these different bodies and different entities, and where investors can get involved. It is a little bit unstructured at the moment. So as time goes on, we're looking at giving it a lot more structure so that everybody knows, they can see the road signs and they know exactly where to go and where to put their money.
Thank you so much, Judy. And then the other question, Judy, I see your hand is up. Perhaps you also want to add something to.
Yes, thank you. What I wanted to say to encourage you even more is that don't be afraid of failing. Failing is part of success. So we all fail, and of course now it's not, I think, about money anymore. It's about ideas and about great technology that's even more powerful. And of course we have somewhat around 5 and 10 years to establish as a great I would say partner for the space industry for everyone, and you have the resources and the skills to do that, no doubt. So thank you very much. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you so much. Anel, anything from your end? Raoul, do you want to comment on the question?
Can you just repeat the question for me, please? I'm battling a bit with the technology to find the questions.
The question was, how do we include local investors to understand the commercial and impact value provided by space?
Okay, thank you. I think Judy answered a lot of it. So SANSA is out there trying to explain and deliver a lot of the route or answer a lot of the questions. But it's a small entity, and it's going to take all the government departments, it's going to take everybody involved in the space sector in South Africa to send this message and help everybody get on board. DTI is one of the government entities which is pushing the boundaries where it comes to information. And DTI is responsible for legislation then the Department of Science and Technology and Innovation is responsible for the facilitation and the doing and building. So that you don't have legislation and operations or legislation and the doing in one. You can't be jury and judge. If I may use that legal term, which which is not my field of expertise, but yes, that's how it fits. So it's about information sharing and getting into the space agency and asking those questions, and where we can help, we will deliver those helpful answers if possible.
Thank you so much. The second question from the chat box is from Beganga. I hope I'm not butchering that. I apologize if I am. So the question is, I'm certain that sustainability must also cover for some of the challenges in the country, namely, unemployment. That I suppose that would be the social aspect or the economic aspect. Does the invite for partnership from the private sector cater for such opportunities, especially for those coming out of the universities? Mainly as a way of providing access to information, research funding, and growth for space exploration for all.
So I can answer that question as well, Getsu. So SANSA provides funding via the NRF and through other bodies for small entities that are starting small initiatives and so forth to create a business and to come up with innovative ideas, which at the end of the day could become part of the industry. And they do it on a yearly basis. So it is for the individuals that are asking the question, have a look at the website and see if, and ask those questions via our open network, and that those answers will be provided. So those calls get done, those innovative for innovation and for small SMEs gets done on a yearly basis when we do have the funds to allow for that type of help or for that type of innovation that we're looking for. And specifically, a lot of that is done for the Earth observation projects within SANSA, where we want innovative ideas where the companies can build an application which will be relevant to the challenges in South Africa. And a simple thing is, can you take Earth observation data and calculate the maize in the country on a daily basis? An application for that. Some of them is like quality of water, how full are the dams? Those are some of the applications we've developed, and we're looking for those type of applications from entrepreneurs, put it that way. And they do get, and there are mechanisms to be sponsored, and we do advertise those mechanisms.
Thank you so much, Raoul. Does any of the panel members want to also contribute? But Riz, I believe this addresses your concerns of students that are fresh from the
Let's say,
university.
Doctor, we have to secure the jobs for the students. So yeah, it's just that really, how do we really concretely build sustainable to be on brand bridges between universities, institutions like SANSA, private entities like where Judy's working, just so that we have the strong field of constantly funneling in the latest the latest, smartest kids who have these ideas to create the apps. And then it also needs to extend then between the law faculty and the engineering department, and then come together there and then send the students forward. So yeah, it's really just finding a way to concretize that relationship and that bridge between the institutions.
Thank you so much, Reese, on that. I don't know if Anel, you have views. I'm going to come back to you, Judy, but Anel, you also work with a lot of students who are also in transition phase. I don't know if you would also have some views on this regards, and how have you experienced that transition and assistance that probably the students can get, or other people that seems to be maybe marginalized, if I could put it that way?
Yes, I think it's very important, that, as we said, that knowledge is funneled into the practical side of things, and that it doesn't stay academic. So that is extremely important. But I know that, as Raoul has said, that SANSA has some scholarship programs and things, so that's extremely helpful. But I also want to say that universities are also, and specifically speaking about UNISA, are also, focusing very much on the space sector as a niche area. And for example, at UNISA, the space exploration, and particularly also matters around the SKA, is regarded as a niche area in which multiple or multi, inter and transdisciplinary research is done. So there you get all these students in different disciplines together, to work together. It's not only legal students, but it's the science students, the mathematics students. They can all, and the idea is that the academics get their postgraduate students involved in different projects or in their projects, and building that capacity, and hopefully that would also be something then that industry can get maybe involved in those projects, and yeah, maybe then funnel in those students into the private sector. So I think the focus is very much shifting towards building capacity in this area, also at university level.
Thank you so much, Anel, and I think your sentiments ties well very nicely with what Maurice spoke about a bit earlier, about the collaborations between let's say faculty of law and the engineering department. So that whole interdisciplinary approch. So Judy, I saw you raised your hand, and also somebody who is multidisciplinary on our panel with MBA and engineering, and so it'll be nice to hear your sentiments as well.
Yeah, from a practical perspective, I certainly know that Stellenbosch University has a high-tech incubator, and actually one of the large players, CubeSpace, came out of that incubator. They're now based in Stellenbosch, and they supply globally. They export, and that is a fantastic company that came out of that incubator. I also know that Wits University, there is some kind of tech incubator there that's sponsored by IBM. I believe that was actually funded by through IBM's contract for SKA, for data analysis or something like that. That goes back to that project. So I think that for students who really want to get involved in developing their own businesses and taking their ideas forward, each university has some kind of intellectual property unit where they want to actually assist students in commercializing their intellectual property, or co-develop it, etc. So it's around basically navigating at your own university. And then the second thing that I would like to mention is that from April, we're going to be engaging. This is a project that's going to be part of coming from Westgrow, is we're going to be engaging the local space sector, private sector, to identify what skills do they need. Because very often they can't actually wait for a student to gain a master's degree in space engineering or space science or something like that. They need them now, and they need them with very, very specific skills. So we're going to do like a skills requirement audit, so we can then take that to the universities and the FET colleges and say, let's link supply with demand. So how can we, make those lines, very kind of like solid lines between supply and demand in the industry, because the industry is definitely like crying out for skills, and also at the same time, people are looking for jobs.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Judy. So we have another question from Natasha Van Rooyen. So Natasha wants to know, is it possible for SANSA to set up a dedicated PPP unit to facilitate partnership and to reduce bureaucratic delays? Also, instead of imposing sustainability compliance, is there a room for rather incentivizing compliance? And I think this came up, somebody who spoke about it, I can't remember who amongst the panelists who spoke about the incentives that perhaps, in order to facilitate the issue of, sustainability, we can think of incentivizing people or private sector. But I want to perhaps give it to Raoul.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for the valid question. Yes, Natasha, I think it's a great idea to ask whether SANSA could put a department together for public-private partnerships. It's been in the thought process. It's part of our strategy to the end of the day to get really involved with the private sector as a public entity. The second question you have is, or not, the idea, instead of imposing sustainable compliance, is there rather incentive compliance. And I believe if we can start bringing space debris back at a cost, that will start turning into an investment. The value of the space debris, if you can bring it back as a whole before it burns out, there's a fair lot of value in that type of stuff. So I think that can turn it into a business. But pose a different question is, I was looking at a lot of these questions, and the question I wanted to ask is legislation proactive or reactive in South Africa? Are we looking at what's coming from the space sector and what is developing internationally as great projects and intuitive projects, and saying, guys, we got to sort out our legislation before that gets to us, and can we get there first? Or are we waiting till it hits our shores and say, okay, now we've got a problem, let's think about this, and now we have to write legislation or change our legislation to suit that? So there's a question for the legal department. Thanks.
Colleagues, do you have, does anybody wants to make comment on that or provide also their perspective on the question? Yes, Allow.
Yes, I mean, the ideal thing would be to be proactive. That would be the ideal in drafting the legislation and keeping up with international trends. Unfortunately, it has been taking a bit of time to get the South African legislation revised. I'm not sure where it is in the process currently. I think it's in the final stages as far as I know. But unfortunately, the problem with space law in itself is that you will not be able, and in domestic legislation, you will not be able to cater for everything. And technology is advancing at such a rapid rate, that there will always be things that creep up that you haven't thought about, or that wasn't perhaps regulated in your legislation. But having said that, I think while South Africa is revising the legislation, that hopefully, these things will be taken into account. The current developments, the international scene that we are part of, and especially the involvement of private entities in space. One should also just keep in mind that your domestic legislation is largely based on the international framework that is provided, in other words, the outer space treaties. And because there are gaps in those treaties, you get a new trend that many states try to make up for those gaps in the national regulation of things. And unfortunately, that tends to lead to a bit of fragmentation, in the legal regulation. So what is hoped that the African Space Agency can play a role in, especially on the African continent, to provide a framework then at least for African states on how we should regulate these very important things in a more unified manner. And so that when we get to the UN corpus, we also have kind of a unified voice when we speak about these issues on regulation. But yes, in an ideal world, it would be great, if we can do this in a proactive manner. But again, I very strongly feel that it shouldn't be a top-down thing, and that all stakeholders, should be involved, and in that way also trying to catch, all these little gaps that creep up. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Anel. And perhaps, Judy, before I jump to the next question, I don't know, if you also have something to say. I just want to find out from you, Jody, from the global north perspective, the regulation that side, how does it work? Is it reactive? Is it proactive? How does it work from your experience from the global north?
Well, my experience in the field of the evolution of legislation now is evolving faster. For instance, regarding space debris, new standards are being incorporated, such as the International Office for Standardization, also the International Telecommunications Union are providing new standards to mitigate and prevent damage caused from space debris, for example. And also, I think it's time to create more bottom-up solutions based on practical examples. For instance, let's work on creating standards out of practices derived from open data. So what type of opportunities, for instance, artificial intelligence or machine learning are bringing us? So I think it's a time to boost and foster international cooperations. There are international commercial missions to South Africa, and of course there are many opportunities in Europe, and it's I think a great chance to create as it happens in Stellenbosch, because last year I remember the Kibo Cube Academy organized in October 2024. So I think it's a great opportunity to interact with the United Nations Office for Aerospace Affairs, the legal subcommittee, the scientific subcommittee, and intervene there as an observer as well. Of course, the delegation of South Africa is present there. So it's a great chance to meet people from everywhere and willing to provide solutions and establish fruitful partnerships. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jody. Riz, do you wanna add something there?
I think Prof really covered that answer.
Thank you so much. So the next question that I would want to pose it's from Tungwani Namani. So Tungwani wants to find out. Tungwani is from SCS Space. So in terms of the current climate in the global market and risk management, how is engaging in a private-public partnership beneficial in terms of sustainable access to markets and the market risk? Is this a key consideration that is taken into account? I don't know who would wanna take that. Judy.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Probably it's my my pronunciation. Let's start with Judy, and then we'll go to Jody.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks. Yes, Tongwane, what did they say? If you want to go fast, you go alone, and if you want to go far, you go together. There's absolutely no way that a tiny space industry in South Africa can go to the global market without public-private partnerships. The local take-up of space technology and hardware and services, etc., is not enough to sustain even a single company in the industry. So you have to export. You have no alternative. You have to see the whole world as your market. And government is absolutely essential when it comes to developing those local markets, exporting, all of those licenses, all of that kind of thing, trade agreements. It's huge. I've been running a business for over 10 years now that exports hardware for the EdTech marketplace and the space EdTech marketplace. And I wouldn't have been able to do it without government assistance. So I think that public-private partnerships are absolutely crucial. It's not a thing about beneficial. It's crucial.
So
thank you so much, Judy. So I'll go to Jody.
Thank you so much, and sorry for overlapping. I just would like to take the example of the Earth observation sector. I mean, we should bear in mind, for instance, the example of Spot Image, the company based in Toulouse that had that started with an investment from the French space agency, and the satellites were public, then went from public to semi-private, and then to private. So now Spot Image has its own satellites. So this is an example. It could happen in South Africa as well. Perhaps like starting from a public or international public, help then let the private economy grow and take over those public ventures. And of course, you can divide and you will win. You can report by technology, whether active or passive sensors, by application, agriculture, military, or disaster management, or by platform, region, or segment forecast. So it's plenty of opportunities. Just get benefit from advisors or from like people coming from other countries or other sectors that are willing and capable to provide for knowledge, and then you can incorporate such knowledge and establish like a kind of lesson learned scenario. And the more you evolve, the more you research, the more solutions will come out.
Thank you so much, Jody. And I don't know if there's anybody who wants to add something to that question. Okay, if we don't have any contributions, then I'm just going to jump to the next question. So Ilana wants to find out, and I think the question will be directed to Reese. So Ilana says, what are examples of collaborations between African states prioritizing the interest of Africans? I ask as I see a problematical Ilana. exceptionalization of South Africa as a spokesperson for Africa in a vein similar than it did under colonialism and apartheid. Are we using indigenous epistemological my computer decides to freeze. I don't know where I was. I don't know where that part is now. Or are we using indigenous epistemological paradigms, or are we merely looking to participate in a fundamentally westernized epistemological endeavor?
Thank you, Lana. Thank you for the question, and it's a very good one, and it's probably one of the burning questions that we really do need to answer, because as we know, how South Africa operates is still in a very neo-colonial way. We still have the new apartheid as spoken about by Dr. Cesar Welch. It's still within our midst. So for us, it's simultaneously having to dismantle that structure while still trying to remain relevant and at the forefront of this new adventure that we call the space frontier, right? So for me, it's a very deep question, because we also then need to look internally to answer the question at the same time, in terms of what is the African Union doing in terms of helping other states, and especially then with stronger states in terms of South Africa being the leading force on the continent. How do we then navigate that realm of inclusion versus inclusion now on the African continent? And I think for me, the African Union is launching the African Space Agency this year. And once again, I hope that it doesn't turn into this mechanism that where we talk, but we don't do. And I think because that's, even if I look at the aviation perspective, just to bring it back to aviation, the single African air transport market is supposed to bring enormous benefits to socio-economic integration between African countries. Then once again, when we look at our African states, it's also our political willingness to get involved and engage in these matters. So it's that simultaneously having to dismantle that while also still trying to create at the same time. And I think that's where that lethargicness comes in, because when you're fighting this battle, you also need like energy to be rejuvenated in terms of being at the forefront of innovation, being at the forefront of being involved, but also how are we being involved? Are we being involved from an African perspective? Why are we going to space in the first place as Africans? What is that answer then? Why are we going to space? Is it just to extract minerals and resources to bring back and then fund those that are benefiting right now already? Or are we going with that look of exploration, what is out there, that lust for knowledge? So it's really a difficult one, and it is a big question, which I hope I answered, Ilana. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reese. But before I come to you, Jody, I quickly want to go to Anel, and I don't know if Anel, you would have a comment on this question.
Yes, there are many examples of collaboration on the African continent in the space sector. For example, the Regional African Satellite Communication Organization, RASCOM, that has already been established in 1992. And then there's the African Leadership Conference on Space Science and Technology for Sustainable Development, where South Africa, Algeria, Kenya, and Nigeria are involved. So there are many examples, and South Africa is playing a leading role on the African continent in the area of space exploration. And I think it is merely because Raoul has already said in his keynote that, you know, we have the expertise and we have the people, although there are still many gaps. And I think Judy has also made this point. I know SANSA is practically illustrating that they want to share knowledge with fellow Africans. They are providing training, I know, to other countries in Earth observation and geospatial areas. And then there's also the Pan-African University that has been established, and one of the campuses will be in South Africa, and the one that they will be also providing postgraduate qualifications. So I think although South Africa is playing a leadership role, at this point, I do not get the impression that, we are just keeping it to ourselves. In fact, I get the impression that South Africa is rather using our skills and what we have, not only for the benefit of the domestic situation in South Africa, but also for the development in SADC and in the wider African region. So I hope that also answers a bit of the question.
Yes, Jody, I'm coming to you now.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a great question because it happened to us in Spain because, of course, we're integrated in the European framework. And, of course, the leading countries are France and Germany. They have great and really strong space agencies. So I believe that it's a matter of sensitivity, protecting your own identity, and of course, a matter of respecting your own country and trying to establish a strong framework, a commercial framework, but again, protecting your interests, because at the end of the day, it's a matter of national security. So in Spain, we just created our own space agency last months, and I think it's a great opportunity because now more Spanish companies are coming out. We have new launching activities, and indeed we have in Catalonia we have a language we have to, of course, protect. So I'm sure that the richness of your country deserves also some attention. Don't forget yourself, your identity, your sensitivity, but of course as well be open to collaborate internationally. I'm sure there's a place for everybody in the sector. So again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jody. I'm gonna, because of time, colleagues, I'm gonna take the last question, one last question before then I move to the closing remarks of Professor Diana Mango. So the last question that I'm gonna take, it's the one from Kanisa. Kanisa wants to know, what about the liability and risk allocation for a satellite launching? Does the state bear liability, or do we require private entities to carry insurance as well to prepare, in case there's some risks happening, and so I don't know. I think Judy, I'll throw this your direction.
That was Judy. I have no idea. I think that the way it works internationally. Okay, so we've put over 80 student satellites into orbit using numerous vehicles, and the way it works is that it's up to the owner of the satellite, let's say, for example, the institution, if they are concerned about, let's say, for example, it fails, and so it's up to them if they want to insure it or not. Okay, in terms of like replacing it. I have an idea that this question is also about what happens when something falls down. We've had a number of instances. There was a well-publicized case recently in Kenya where some space debris, fell and really could have injured people and damaged property, etc. So we've got three players really. We've got the country that grants the license, We've got the launch provider. They have to make sure that whatever it is that they put up there, if they meant to put it into a particular orbit, that they actually do have effective orbital insertion. And then you have the owner of the space asset itself. So maybe what we can do is let's have a look at the motor vehicle industry. Okay. If you have a vehicle, you insure it yourself if you need to replace it. Okay. There's also an aspect of what if your vehicle damages another vehicle or people, etc. So therefore, you need to have that kind of insurance. And then let's say, for example, the state provides the infrastructure. If something happens to your vehicle on a road, do you then claim that from the government if the government's operating that road, or do you claim it from the toll company who maybe owns the section of that road and is charging tolls, etc.? So I think it's very much specifically, for me, liability is a product of a risk analysis. I think that what needs to happen is that before licenses are granted, we need to have a look at what are the risks here and can we quantify those risks, and then who's going to be impacted by those risks in terms of, and then who needs to be liable. So I think that it's quite a general question. I think it's one of those things where we need to be able to look at it case by case, because we're going from anything from a pocket cube size, which is like, a few 100 grams, to things that are like tons, So, it needs to be, we need to have a look, we need to have different categories. Sorry, I'm rambling now. I'm going to keep quiet.
Okay, Anel, I see your hand is up, but before I quickly jump to Anel, I want to start with Raoul. Raoul, do you have any sentiments on this before I jump to Anel?
Thanks, Doc. So it's your choice if you want to insure your spacecraft on launch. It's fairly expensive, so you would probably go to a reputable launch vehicle, and these launch vehicles get the insurance companies use the effectiveness of the launch vehicles to determine what your insurance cost will be and how many spacecraft are on the launch vehicle. And so it's your choice. You don't have to insure your spacecraft. If you've got another one on the ground and you build two, then you got the odds again for you, and you can launch that one at a later stage at the cost. So that's the first portion. If your spacecraft does not make it and falls in somebody's house, you will be liable. If space junk comes through the atmosphere and lands on your house or burns a hole through your house, the owner of the spacecraft is liable. End of the day, it's to prove that space junk came from that typical re-entry portion. The challenge, I think, is if you have two spacecraft colliding in space, it's then to prove whose spacecraft was at fault. Was I in the wrong orbit? Did I raise my orbit, or was I on my way out, or could I not control my spacecraft? And so those are the challenges, and that's to prove. That is for the court to determine. But the two I've explained. Those are the two issues I'm aware of.
Thank you so much. I hope that never happens. Goodness, that something just falls through our houses. You wake up and then boom, something just fell into your house. Anel, I'm just gonna quickly go to you. Please, in the next 3 minutes ish, maybe, and then we can round up this session.
Yeah, just very quickly, the liability convention is very clear that it has a dual liability regime. So where damage is caused on the Earth by or to an aircraft in flight by a space object, the state incur absolute liability. and it's not based on fault. So it will still be the liability of the state. So that is why many states in granting a license would then demand from the private entity that, or require from them that they have the necessary insurance, because the state will in the first place be held liable. So yeah, and as Raoul said, it's when it's space debris, it's often very difficult, you know, to find out whose little piece of debris caused this and who should be held liable. But in terms of the liability convention, it is in the first place the state that's liable, and then obviously it will determine what the agreement between the state and that private entity is, and how the compensation will be, or a portion of the compensation might be you know, retrieved from the private entity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anel. Jody, yes.
Yes, about insurance, I would like to say that we have the possibility to study liability from previous examples, such as I remember the Cosmos 954 case, which was a Russian satellite that exploded and all the fragments reached the territory of Canada. And at the end, I think they solved it peacefully before going to a strict trial. Right, they reached to a settlement. Of course, these things might happen. Even SpaceX now is being investigated by a commission because of a failure, launching failure. As of course, Professor Ferreira established, the launching state has liability, and there's the ultimate state responsibility notion. But we should not discard, in this case, to create like an international consortium of insurance companies capable to insure space missions. And why not like financial insurance established by their own bank, capable to finance a whole project. So there are ways to at least to conduct and to carry this matter related to the insurance and risks. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Jody. Colleagues, unfortunately, we have run out of time. I had multiple questions that I still needed to ask, but that I could not, unfortunately, because of time, get to ask. But it has really been an enriching discussion, and I'm sure we learned a lot. And some of the takeaways that I got from our discussion, you know, it's the issue of sustainability. You know, how do we define sustainability? It's something that still, you know, it needs to be considered. It's a conversation that needs to still go on. And I think, as Reece said, if we talk about sustainability, on whose eyes are we looking at it from? You know, on whose perspective, on whose context are we talking about sustainability? You know, the other issue that came up quite a lot, it's the issue of the legal framework, especially in African countries, that the other countries, they do not seem to have a legal framework, even though South Africa seems to be doing quite well. But, you know, our sister countries in the African continent, they still don't have a legal framework, and that poses a bit of a challenge. And then some other gaps, you know, that Anel raised on international framework that we often, you know, refer to. There are some other gaps that you still find there. So we also learned that, you know, as Jordi said, you know, it's time for the Global South to also be active. It's our time now to shine. But also then we want to commend South Africa, particularly Sansa, you know, for making strides. And they shared some couple of exciting examples of where there has been a successful public-private partnerships that we have seen. And again, the issue of exclusion of some members of the private sector is still a bit of a problem. Riz also spoke about this, and was highlighted by Ilana's questions as well. We still seem to be excluding, you know, some part of the private sector, particularly those do not have sufficient financial muscle to participate in this kind of thing, especially when you speak about the risk sharing the risks. It becomes a problem. And then the other takeaway point that I noted is it's then the issue of creating the rules. Who makes the rules of engagement, and who are they meant for? Who do they favor? That it's still something that we need to consider. And then the issue of accountability as well. Are the private entities, can we hold them accountable? Even I think the public sector as well, the issue of accountability, can we hold them accountable for some of the actions that they perform? So those are some of the points that I noted that for me they are the takeaway, and I'm sure other colleagues as well. There are multiple points that we took away, but I sincerely want to thank everybody that took part and participated in our discussion today. Our panelists, I sincerely want to thank you as the chair for this panel discussion, and also with the chair of the webinar. I wanna thank you. Kadir earlier said I should bring my charm. I hope I did not disappoint. I hope I lived up to that expectation. So I really want to thank you for the enriching discussions. Thank you for the participation. I really enjoyed it, and I really also want to thank our audience as well for engaging in the chat box, and also the panelists who were able to engage with our audience and answer the some of the questions. So thank you so much. So at this point, we were supposed to have Professor Ntombi Sozogwediane Mango, who is the head of the Department of Public Law, giving us her closing remarks. But unfortunately, she quickly had to rush to the meeting with the Dean of the Faculty of Law. So there was a bit of a clash there in the diary. She wasn't anticipating to have that meeting, but however, she gave me some of her talking points. So I'm going to quickly read her remarks. So she says, "Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm so sorry I had to rush off to a meeting with the Dean at 12:30. So there was a mix-up in my calendar today. So it is really a pleasure for our Department of Public Law and the #1 law faculty in Africa to collaborate with the South African National Space Agency, SANSA, for this webinar titled Harnessing Public-Private Partnership for Sustainable Space Exploration and Utilization. So the Department of Public Law focuses on those areas of the law that traditionally fall within the public domain. This includes the areas of constitutional law, administrative law, the human rights law, legal interpretation, criminal law, and international law. Flowing from this are the several specialized areas, including the environmental law, extractive industry law, medical law, municipal law, international airspace and telecommunications law, international criminal law, and international humanitarian law, and the statutory crimes. So members of the department actively contribute to these areas through teaching on the undergraduate LLB program, as well as the variety of postgraduate coursework and research programs, including the LLM, MPhil, and LLD. So the department hosts 3 specialized academic entities, including the newly established Center for Environmental Justice in Africa, where part of the things that we do quite a lot there is to deal with the issue of sustainability. So we have the newly established Center for Environmental Justice in Africa, the Center for Law and Medicine and Extractive Industry Law in Africa unit. So the department also hosts the National Research Foundation, or NRF, South African Research Initiative chair for the International Constitutional Law. We are particularly pleased for this collaboration with SANSA, as our department offers a highly sought flagship LLM program in the international airspace and communications law. which we offer every 2 years. So international airspace and telecommunications law is a niche area that we hope to grow in our department. So the lectures are facilitated by the lecturers and guest lecturers who can be considered as experts in the field of law. So we hope that this collaborations with SANSA is a start of a fruitful relationship there, where we will be able to tap into the skills and experience to invite colleagues to guest lecture in our LLM program. So our students would benefit immensely from these lectures. We have already also spotted some of the potential, I guess, like I'm speaking on behalf of my boss here. We've spotted, I was listening, we spotted some of the potential, I guess, lectures. So our students would benefit immensely from such lectures. The department is also open to have conversations on how we can enhance this collaboration. We are excited of that and what this could mean. So I would also like to thank the keynote speaker, Mr. Hodges, for inspiring speech. I would also like to thank the panelists for such interesting contribution on the space and sustainability. I would like to also single out our colleague from UNISA, Professor Pereira Sneyman, and thank her for availing herself and being a great neighbor, because UNISA is just next door. And thank you to the organizers of this webinar. Thanks to my colleagues in the Department of Public Law, Utilisation, who was the chair this morning, and Ms. Ilana Leroux, who are responsible for the research seminar. We also want to thank Ilana for working tirelessly in the background, and this is for an incredible chairing of this webinar. Thanks to Rafia, our honorary member in the Department of Public Law, and thanks to Riabete for being such an advocate for our international airspace and communications law program, and also for really initiating this discussions. And this is highly appreciated, colleagues. We appreciate all the efforts. And the same goes for Reese as well, the alumnus of this program and my current doctoral student, as it was alluded to earlier. So the webinar would be nothing without our audience. And I just want to thank all for you for attending in and participating this morning. So colleagues, that is from Professor Ntombizuzu Godiane Mango. So thank you so much, colleagues. But also it would be really remiss of me also not to thank the colleagues from SANSA. It'll be remiss of me from not acknowledging the colleagues from SANSA. I want to especially personally, as they said. So I want to thank Mr. Michael Kabai. We have been having countless meetings on a weekly basis in preparation for this. We also want to thank Vaneshri came in and helped us also with marketing. I want to thank Kabir also took part this morning and it gave me an enormous task of just smiling and trying to entertain all of you, which I do not think I did successfully. But I thank him, and we thank Nelisile as well. Nelisile also was part of the meetings that we had in preparation for this. But I also want to thank our where is that paper that I had? My goodness, don't embarrass me. There is one person I also want to thank. Oh yeah, I want to thank Ms. Mohamata, Leboham Mohamata, who also took an active role in working with Vaneshri to do the marketing. It will really be remiss of me not to thank Lebohang. But then I also wanted to thank Ms. Bongile Mazibogo. I think she left as she indicated that she had a bit of a busy schedule. So I want to thank her also for doing the opening remarks this morning. Also taking time from her busy schedule. So colleagues, thank you so much. And you have a beautiful afternoon. I see there is a hand that is raised. Unfortunately, Majaja, there's no mute. Sorry, there's no mic function that ends, so I cannot take you. But please do drop your comment on the chat box. And thank you so much, colleagues. Let's keep this conversation going. We see that there is a lot to discuss, but we just unfortunately run out of time. But there is a lot of discussions that we still need to have in terms of sustainability, you know, in the in the space area and the public-private partnership. So thank you so much, colleagues. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.